Hey, good morning, guys. It's me again. Hey, listen, recently I sat down with Trevor Macgowan, and he shared a story about growing up in India, then traveling to, and eventually moving to Great Britain, and then as a young man joining a rock band with John Bonham. And I thought it was really interesting. So stay tuned. I think you may find this interesting too. We've talked many times about the different things that you've gone through, and then we started talking yesterday, and the more I started listening, the more interested I was, and I thought, this is really the story right here. And so I thought it would be good just to kind of go back to the beginning, where it started and where you were born, and the year, and let's kind of start with that. So you were born where?
Born a long time ago in India, in January 15, 1940. That's 1940. Lived part of my life there, schooling and education there, before I moved to England.
Okay. So the thing that most people wouldn't know is the status or the labeling you had, and I don't want that to sound negative, but what were you considered? What kind of Indian?
An Anglo-Indian, which is what I am, is a kind of a hybrid between the British and the Indian. Anglo-Indians are a group of people who were really the children of the British who lived in India. And they left behind their children, and the British, Welsh, English, Scottish, Irish, they would have married local people. And the local people is also a very diverse implication, because you've got so many different people's groups in India. And an Anglo-Indian is really an offshoot, a child or children of British and Indian parents.
Okay.
That's what I am, an Anglo-Indian.
Okay. And so, of course, India was colonized by the British.
That's right.
I don't know if you know the date of that, when that happened, but
it happened a long time ago.
But
India gained independence in 1947, August of 1947, and then India became a free country. And my family, my parents, decided that we children, our best future would be secured for us in England. And so I left England, like the rest of my brothers, to go to England. I left India rather to go to England. And that's where I lived, grew up, educated, and started work and a career.
So something you had said yesterday prior to leaving, you had talked about, it's okay, you had talked about the servants you had in India, and I thought that was kind of interesting, because a lot of people don't have servants.
Conjures up in your mind.
It does.
Yeah.
But then you said some very interesting things about trying to set a perspective of that, really. And so it wasn't that you were rich by any means, right?
No. But Anglo-Indian people, like many Indian people as well, had servants. The servants were very low class, very poor people, and they basically did your cooking, did your cleaning, did your laundry. Sometimes they cleaned your home, and it was a full-time job for them. But we provided, in exchange for that and some money, we provided a little place for them to live, very sparse, very basic, but that's where they lived. If they didn't have that, they would have nowhere to live, no place to.
Okay, so you were talking about the servants, and when we had left, you had given that some thought, and you had mentioned something about it.
The servants. There's an aspect about the servants which bears mentioning. And it is just the simple fact that these were poor, homeless people, maybe a young family who had nowhere to live, no means of earning any money at all. There was no government help. And so by providing them a job as a servant, you were giving them two things. You were giving them a roof over their head, albeit very basic, but you also give them a little bit of money to live on. And they also had your food, the food that they cooked. They would give them part of that food to eat. So they at least had food provided, a roof over their heads provided, and very, very basic living. So it helped them to some extent. It helped us as well.
Okay. So, at some point, probably a long time ago, your parents had already made up their mind. They were going to ship you guys off. And so you have 5?
That's right, 5 brothers. So 6 of us altogether.
So, there was no chance financially for them to ship you off all at once, first of all.
No.
So there was a savings that had to take place, right?
That's right.
And
a lot of money had to be saved to pay for the fares.
And you were, which number were you?
I was number 3,
okay.
Middle of the family.
Okay. So, do you remember what year that was that you?
Yeah, it was April of 1961 that I sailed from Bombay, India, and headed for the UK, England, Britain, and went by boat, by ship, and landed in Genoa, Italy, and across land from Genoa, Italy, all the way across to finally ending at Calais in France, and from there over by a hovercraft to Dover, and from Dover by train to some part of London, and from London my brothers came and picked me up and took me back to the residence where I was going to stay for the next so many years of my life, which was Birmingham, England.
So obviously this was before cell phones, this was for GPS.
Oh, yes.
Here's a guy 21 that had to maneuver his way on a ship, from a ship to a train, through these places. You've never even left the country, right?
Never knew anything of these places, so it was just perfectly solo, and it's kind of scary in a way because there was no one there to assist you, to tell you where you're going. We just had an address. Fortunately, my brothers came and picked me up from London, and then living began.
You ever take a wrong turn anywhere? Or you pretty much, were you fortunate enough?
In terms of the journey, no. I just followed the instructions, catch the right train, make certain you're on the right ship, and everything worked out. Thank the Lord, everything worked out perfectly.
Well, luckily you made it here safely, and that was good. But then I started thinking, when I started asking these questions, and I thought, well, heck, now he's here, but you did have at least somebody to go to, an anchoring point.
Yes.
So that was fortunate, right?
Yes, I had an aunt in Birmingham. She had come over from India to England many years before that, so she had a home. So there was an established base to go to, and I stayed there for a few years and moved in with my older brother, and after that, sometime after a few years, I married my present wife, and we got married, and I moved out. We moved out into our own home.
I suppose
our first home.
When you got there, I mean, did you have some idea what you wanted to do? I mean, I can't imagine what that would have been like.
Actually, I left India, having taught 2.5 years of school in an Anglo-Indian school that was set up in New Delhi. And my my real aim, my intention was to go to England, complete a degree in psychology and education, and then go back to India to teach. I was teaching at the Frank Anthony Public School in Lajpat Nagar in New Delhi, and it was a school that was set up particularly for foreigners who wanted an English education in India. And I was one of the founding teachers in that school. And that was my aim. But like many aims,
Didn't happen, right?
it didn't happen.
Took a right turn somewhere, and
That's right.
Off you went, I think. Probably.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey, very interesting journey, but the original journey kind of got misplaced along the way, got lost.
How's that?
And I got involved with young people, with the youth club and music, and that took me in a different direction, albeit a very adventurous one, challenging one, interesting one, but nonetheless a totally different direction.
So you had said something about, I don't know if this was you started working in like a factory or something like that, but eventually you worked for the fire department, and there was an interesting story with that.
I lasted probably less than a week at this factory centre where somebody got me a job, just a job. And first day I realized that was not for me, and I went dressed in a coat and suit and things like that. And, you know, I had no idea. Anyhow, and then shortly after that, when I stopped working there, I was walking downtown in Birmingham, and I walked into the fire department, and I said, I would like to consider being a fireman. And, oh yes, and I was the first person in England who was non-white, who was both interviewed and taken on into the fire department in England, in Birmingham. And that was a very interesting year. I spent a year doing that. But during that time, I was also getting to be heavier and heavier involved in music, and being a lead guitarist of a group and in a youth group, and I was teaching them their parts, and they didn't know how to play guitar. Many of them, even the drummer didn't know how to pick up a proper beat in his drums. And we persisted, and we became a pretty decent rock group.
So I'm really interested in the musical piece of this, and we kind of skipped over the fact that you had a musical background, at least
Yes,
from
I did.
your dad,
Yes.
right? Your dad was into music
Yes.
pretty heavily.
My dad was a musician. He played in a dance band in India, and every Saturday night he was out playing in dance bands. You know, he played many instruments. He played about 5 or 6 instruments, and I grew up in that kind of musical atmosphere. But I played guitar. I learned the piano, and I learned violin. I tried the trumpet for a little while as well. I even tried the clarinet. But I stuck with the guitar, and that's the one that I guess I felt was most promising for me. And as a young person, it had some sound of adventure to it, and stardom maybe. And stayed with the guitar, and we ended up being a bigger rock group, and then we began to play, and they made a record. We were on TV a couple of times.
So, this is one of the areas I really was excited about talking about. But just for one last minute on the from the minority status, how did you find that to be an issue at all? I mean, were you frowned upon in any way or manner, or
As
how
a
were you
young
treated?
person, there was tended to be a tendency on my part of, if there was, I'm not aware that I ignored it, but I'm aware that I lived life in spite of it. I didn't sense any kind of prejudice or racism when I was in the rock group, and you're mainly in a young people's kind of environment. And at that level, you got people who are stars. And we were in England, and here you had black stars and black singers, and an exchange of people from continent to continent. And it didn't actually strike me that, you know, here I was the only colored person in this rock band. They were all white. But I was the leader of the group, and I had formed the group.
So you landed in this kind of arena in a really interesting time, because for the United States we had that thing called the British invasion.
That's right.
And
that's right.
there was just a crazy amount of talent coming out of England at that time. And
Yeah.
just for whatever reason, and especially in Birmingham where you were, and I've always been impressed with the fact that there was so much talent musically in that area. You fell right in the middle of that.
We played with some of those bands that became famous, like they were Denny Lane and the Diplomats.
Yeah.
Later on renamed as the Moody Blues. We played with a bunch of these bands who became famous, and we played with the Moody Blues at the same venue every week for years, maybe about 2 or 3 years. And by chance, when we were playing at an event, a lady heard of us and she called to see me. And she owned the Ritz Ballroom in Birmingham. And she talked to me and she said, "How good is your band?" And I said, "Well, why don't you come and hear us sometime?" She did. She heard the record. She said, "I'd like to book you." So we played at her place. She had 2 venues, very famous venues. And we played at both of them. And she had great plans, and she wanted to have me for the lead guitarist. She wanted to form a super group as the second challenge to the Beatles.
Okay.
And she wanted the super groups, and she picked somebody from the Hollies and somebody from the Rocking Berries and myself, and then she had 1 or 2 local people, and she had the group picked, and including the drummer that was with us, that I had taken on, and his name was John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. She wanted him and me, not the rest of the group. So we played for her a few times, but when she had designs on greater future events, I backed out. I was, with my friends, my buddies in my group, we were friends together. And I walked away from that.
So I'm sure a lot of people's ears just jumped up when you mentioned John Bonham because of his international status.
Oh,
but
yes.
I'll just tell everybody that while maybe you weren't known internationally, I've always been impressed with your musical ability, because me being kind of a struggling person, always enjoying playing guitar, you always seemed to just pick it up, and you were a very good guitarist, and I was always amazed with that. But so you guys picked up John Bonham, and yeah, I know you've always told me a bunch of stories, and we have some pictures, I think, or one picture or something in particular we were going to show. But we haven't even talked about the name of the band.
Oh, the name of the band, the original name, when I was taking over the band at the youth club, they wanted to call it the Sidewinders. Well, that didn't impress me, but I said, okay, fine, call it the Sidewinders. But we weren't an official band that's playing out in venues. This was playing in the local youth club. When we got to become a viable band, just playing in different institutions, I told the guys, this name doesn't wear well with me. And I said, they said, what would you like to call it? I'd like to maybe call it the Senators. So we called the band the Senators. And we wrote a song called She's a Mod, M-O-D. And you can hear it. You pick up your phone and dial She's a Mod by the Senators from Birmingham. You'll hear us. So we call it the Senators. And John Bonham of Led Zeppelin is a very interesting character. He was with us for 2.5 years. Very independent. An incredible drummer. And a very adventurous, free spirit. Great person, we're great friends, but twice I had to fire him from the band because in the interval between sessions, sometimes he'd disappear, he found some young woman, a young girl, he was only 16 himself, he'd been gone for the rest of the night. And that didn't sit well with me. So twice I fired him, took him back. Then I decided I'd had enough and I left the group. Group broke up. He came to our house with the singer, Terry, who was his friend, a neighbor. And he wanted me to come back so we could reform. And I said, no, I've had enough. And I was just engaged. And he came actually on the night of our engagement party. So I said, no, that's it for me. And I parted ways with the group and with that kind of music, because I went into ministry after that.
So what I would like to do is, I'd like for the interview, to me there's two parts of this story, and the first part ends when we get into the ministry, and I'd like to talk about that. But then on our next interview, which will be at a later date, I want to really get into the career side of you, which is totally an interesting story in itself. So I think we'll break that in two, if you don't mind. But so you went from fireman to a pretty popular regional band in England, and
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and with a hit, and then it's like just done.
Yeah, lasted four and a half years, and it was done. A very short career, but a lot of very interesting, challenging moments. It was fun, but it didn't somehow suit my core.
Something triggered you to turn toward ministry all of a sudden.
Yes, I had this very deep instinct within me that kind of drove me all through my life. That life is more than just a number of random experiences that one collects along the way. I felt that there was more of a pattern to life, and there was a journey, and that there was is an author to life, and therefore a guiding counselor. And that's the path I chose. I remember when I was preaching one of my first sermons in a church in England, and a young lady walked up to me and brought me a newspaper clipping, and it was of John Bonham, his death. And I remember thinking how he chose one road that led to his death. I chose another road, I believe, that led to life. And I changed my total sermon. In just one flash of a moment, I looked at the paper and I thought, that's a different sermon. And I put my sermon down and I talked about John Bonham and two roads of life, how people have the choice. And he chose that road that led lots of money, lots of fame, lots of popularity, lots of stuff, but lots of stuff that's devastating, dangerous, and destructive.
Yeah, that was a sad story, and me, like so many others, were obviously huge fans too of him and his drumming and such. But so the road did not end in England. You got married, and you guys
Married in England.
took another right turn, and
we did.
Ended up here in the United States, right?
That's right.
And by that time you had children.
Yes, we had 3 children.
Yeah, so then coming over here, you continued your ministry into different churches.
Yeah, I continued my studies first in preparation for ministry, and went into ministry first in England for 5.5 years, and then that's after training. And the training itself was 4 years long, full time. And then I came here, finished off my education in Michigan, and then called back to this country, to Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to be senior pastor of the church. Very interesting journey. That was a memorable, very memorable journey.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. And your daughter has talked about all the different cities you guys have lived in, and always been amazed by how many different places you guys had been in the United States in a short period of time. But you guys went back to England for a short period of time, right? You came over, didn't you go back?
We came back. We came here to complete a master's degree. When that was completed, we returned to England, went back into ministry in England, and then the family liked it. We all liked it here so much in America that we decided we'd like to come back. And so lots of churches sent me requests, and please come and minister in our church and be pastor of our church. And we went through the official channels, and I got an official call to be the senior pastor of the Milwaukee Seventh-day Adventist Church back in 1981. So we left England, 4 suitcases and 6 boxes, that's all.
A little different weather in Milwaukee than in
Very
England.
different, beautiful place. And what a splendid church, what an absolutely astounding experience for us, particularly for me.
So you were in Milwaukee. Weren't you guys in Minnesota for a while?
We went to Minnesota for some time, and the campus ministry.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we took a little hiatus. We took a leave of absence, to work on a doctorate. And before that could be started or completed, we were called back into ministry, and we went to Ohio. And you know the rest of the story because we lived in Ohio.
Right.
Your state.
That's right. And then in the finale, at least where part 1 of this interview, you kind of ended up in Florida.
That's right.
Right. And then, that's a really fascinating story. I appreciate you sharing that. The next time we talk, I think it's good to start into these careers, because it kind of, one of the themes of my site is talking about people that are at the age of retirement, and what are they going to do with the rest of their life. And by no means, while you may somehow get a Social Security check, you've never retired, and now you're 83, yeah, and still going strong and still working. So I don't want to break into that too much, but that'll be part 2 of the story. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
One thing in my life that I've never done, still don't do it. I don't have this tendency, like most people when they arrive at the senior life, the golden age life, retirement. I don't compartmentalize myself into this is work, and this is retirement, and this is what you're supposed to do. I don't think like that. I see life as a very blended experience. That one day you're doing this, another day you're doing that, and yeah, you might slow down, you might have less money and all this stuff, but I've never seen this. I've never had this need to compartmentalize my life and say this segment belongs here, this segment belongs here. To me, it is all flows into one. So it tends to make you feel. It makes you feel a kind of agelessness, if it's possible to say that, so that you're not conditioned by 80-year-olds don't do that. 70.
Right.
I mean, I go to the gym 3, 4, 5 days a week. I go to the gym, and I work with people. Some of them are 16 years old. Many of them are in their 60s and 70s. I just happen to be the oldest person at the gym, but I'm also one of the guys who works the hardest.
That point is so valid and so important, and I totally agree with you 100% on that. From my point, now everybody has their own journey, but that's the one I always am preaching, and so I really appreciate you saying that. So why don't we stop here,
okay,
and we'll pick this up on part 2.
Hey guys, I hope you like the story with Trevor Macgowan. If so, please take a second and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And just an FYI, I have part 2 of the interview coming up soon, so stay tuned.